Hi YouTubers, I'm Colin and this is TamiyaTruckBuilding. In this, the penultimate video, part 21, we'll be building sections 53 to 56. This includes painting and assembling the dashboard and seats and adding decals, and then fitting those parts plus the front grille and wheel arches. To finish off, we'll mount the cab to the truck. So, lots to do, let's get building. Section 53 is all about building the dashboard. I've got some nice new brushes, and the colour that they suggest that I'm going along with is XF53, which is a light grey colour. And what I do remember from this is that it's a particularly thick paint and needs a lot of stirring. So that's actually 2 minutes worth that I've sped up there at 16 speed. Just to show you just how much stirring that paint needed to actually mix everything up that's in it. You can see the parts that need painting. I'm going to start with the dashboard. I'm not going to subject you to me painting every single part, so there's going to be quite a few bits during this episode where I speed it up, but I think you'll get the drift of what I'm doing. This is the first coat. Just spread it out, don't try and put it on too thick. And don't worry if you miss odd little bits, because I plan to do a second coat, and then a third coat will be just to touch up any bits that are a bit on the weak side. But you will see that it'll build up slowly. The two seats in this particular model are the same solid colour, which is quite easy if you're a novice. I know for the more experienced modeller they sometimes have 2, even 3 colours on the seats, and they can be a challenge to paint, shall we say. I've kept a little piece of the sprue on the side so that I can hold the seats, and I'll break that off in a little while, and that'll be part of the touch-up that you do at the end. Try and keep a piece of plastic on a part where you can. Saves you trying to handle a part that's got wet paint on it, frankly. And although they say do the steering wheel all in one colour, I do plan to do the rim in black, sort of black leather, just to make it stand out. Try not to paint the parts that you know are going to be glued together, like I haven't done the middle of the back of the steering wheel. Here we go again, 2 hours later, believe it or not. We're just having a look at the second coat on this now. Again, don't try and put it on too thick, just enough to cover it and spread it out. Try not to brush it too much, because after about, I don't know, 10 seconds it will soften the paint that's underneath. So you want to get your coat on before it starts affecting the coat that you put underneath. Second coat on the seats. Having given the black paint a bit of a stir, I'm just going to do the stays. Note that I'm stopping short of the piece that you can see in the bottom by my left hand, which glues on the underside of the seat. If you paint it, you're going to have great fun. Well, you're not going to have great fun, but it's going to be more difficult to try and glue the items together because you're doing paint on paint rather than plastic. Speed it up again. And although it's not in this section, I've done the number plate for the front as well. Sometimes it's worth just looking ahead a section or two, because you can get all your paints out and everything else and paint, and then suddenly find you move on and there's one item that you could have painted at the same time. What I'm going to do now is just the odd touch-up of bits where the paint hasn't covered particularly well. For example, where you've broken the sprues off, which was just on the side of the seat, if you recall. It's just a case of touching it in. A lot of cases with Tamiya paints, when they're wet, they look a different colour to when they're dry, so don't worry about it. You'll find when it dries the colour changes. And also the stays had some bits of plastic sprues on them as well, and the number plate where I couldn't hold it and paint it all. Again, not in this section, but just a touch later on, are the 3 handles underneath the windshield and the 2 wiper blades. You could leave them plastic black, but they do tell you in the instructions to paint them with a semi-gloss. I try and put a coat on because over a period of time the plastic can go a little bit discoloured, particularly if it's in sunlight, that kind of thing. So try and avoid bare plastic if you can. Best to put a coat of paint on it to protect it. Kept the sprues on these, as you can see at the moment, because there's no way you could handle them not painting the bottom corner where the pin is, where it locates onto the screen. While all that lot's drying, we'll start to cut out the dashboard transfers. Again, I'm going to speed this up a little bit for you. There's a few different ones of these, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bits I think. Some of them are quite small, you might need to, as you'll see, use your tweezers to hold them. In this particular model, it's got the darkened glass, which is a shame, but I've still built the dash. The model will be up for sale at the end, and you know, there's an option then for you to put clear glass in, and you'll see all the detail of the dash rather than me just leave it all white. Plus this is an instructional video, so why shouldn't I do it anyway? Well, the wonders of technology, 8 speed, just cutting these bits out. Keep close to the edge of the transfers, particularly with some of these ones on the dash, because they tend to fit in recesses and things like that, and if you leave extra over the sides they won't fit where they're supposed to fit properly. I've got a little pair of curved scissors I use, which are very good round corners. I think they once belonged to the good wife, but don't tell her I said that. There's a first transfer going on, which is a very, very small Volvo motif, which goes on the steering wheel. Now, before I put some of the dash on, I'm just going to clean up the steering column. Now, I painted on the sides of this, and that it's now put just a little bit of a thin film on and made it too tight for it to go into the particular slot that it's supposed to go in. And in any case, I want plastic to glue. So I'm just using a typical nail file brush, medium coarse, just to take off the plastic off the outside. Sorry, just to take the paint off the outside. And there's a little bit of a burr on the bottom, which I'm just going to get rid of as well. Once this is in place, we'll just touch the paint up anyway. The beauty of these paints being water based is that they dry quickly, and you can rub them off easily, and you can put another coat on quite easily. You can touch them up quite easily. I'm using super glue here rather than Tamiya cement, because I want to move on to the transfers. You could do the dashboard transfers before you put that in, but I prefer to put it in because I can see situationally where all the parts go then in relation to that column. Just like other transfers I've done, if it's a reasonably large transfer like this one, cut half of the backing off first, keeps you the other half to hold on to line it up. This one's a bit of a challenging one because it goes round on several angles. I did place it first, which is a tip, to just see how it fits, so I've got a good idea of where it needs to go. And then just have some faith then when you take the second part off, it should just layer down exactly where you want it to go. Couple more of these wood effect transfers. This one goes right in the corner. I use a stick or a cotton bud or anything to just sort of help me get them exactly where I want them. And as you can see now, sometimes a finger as well is necessary. You'll devise whatever means you feel appropriate. Here comes the good old clocks to go above or behind the steering wheel rather. It's a ledge that they sit against, but other than that it's quite an easy job, this one. That's why I've got the steering column in place, because I can see where it lines up in relation to where the steering wheel will go. This goes just to the right of the clocks. And then on the right hand side of the dash, just two very, very small vents. And another tip of mine, just use a finger to steady your tweezers. And the last one for the dash just coming up now. So that's the dash completed. Just scraping a bit of plastic off the back of the steering wheel, because this, I've done it again, just scraping a bit of paint off the plastic on the back of the steering wheel. Again, I'm just going to use a little bit of super glue. And pop it in place. The bit you can see there that's white doesn't need to be painted, it angles downwards, as you can see now. You can't possibly see that, even with clear glass. And there we go, dashboard complete. Now going to glue the stays to the bottom of the seats. And this is the area where I said to avoid putting paint, because as you'll see, if you keep the paint off it, they will glue quite quickly. They drop into a little recess on the bottom of the seat. There we go. That's the seats done. Okay, I'm moving on now to what is in fact section 55. It's because I've still got the paints out, and rather than get the paints out again, there is a need to paint a fine silver line, as you'll see, around the protruding parts of the grille. I'm using a fairly fine flat-headed brush for this. Just loading my brush up and just carefully going round it. Once again, you may need to do 2 coats, but if you're careful you can probably get away with 1. By 16 speed magic, I'm touching it all in for you very quickly. I have to say this is quite a challenging bit of painting. You may be up for it, you may not, but I think the effort produces quite a nice result, and makes the Volvo logo that's going to go in the middle stand out. I'm just touching a few bits in now. If you happen to go over onto the black slightly, don't panic, let it dry. You can always touch it in with an extremely fine black brush. I did have one spot where I just touched the black and I touched it back in again. Backtracking now to section 54, which is where we fit the dash and the seats back in the truck whilst the grille's drying. They're both held on with the same screw, so you've got to try and hold 2 plastic parts, put a pin through and put a nut on the inside, which is one of those situations where if you had 3 hands would be helpful. I'm just going to get the dash in position first. You could always do what I preach and use a piece of plastic, use a toothpick to hold one of the holes in line. I've chosen to put the pin through, which is quite long, or the threaded bolt to give it its proper name. Seats on this truck aren't handed. Some seats are handed. You usually got probably a seatbelt anchorage on the top or something, but something slightly different about them. Say in this model they're both exactly the same, so it doesn't matter which one you put in which side. Once we've got the nut in place, hopefully I can just use a screwdriver to pull it up. Once you've done the one side, the other side's a little bit easier. Just going to speed it up a bit now. Try and hold the nut in place while I do the screw from the front. Sorry you can't see that. Being right-handed it's difficult sometimes. There we go. That's all there is to it. Sadly, if they'd have given us clear glass, you'd be able to see that better. Moving back to 55 now, section 55 is where we fit the grille that we painted earlier, and 2 more cab side panels, which they call the wheel arches. Grille's nice and easy one with just 2 screws. The wheel arches are just held on purely by glue. I have painted this part, or sprayed this part here, which I shouldn't have done. It would have been better not to paint it because you'd get a stronger bond, but I am using super glue here rather than Tamiya cement. They glue along that edge, and there's also just one very small point at the front where you can glue it as well. Leave those for a period of time and let them dry thoroughly, because you'll just break them straight off again. Last but not least now, section 56, where we mount the cab, and this mounts purely with 2 screws at the front, and if it helps you locate it, although you can't see it, there is a pin at the back of the cab which locates into a plastic part that's on the chassis. I'm just popping a peg into the one side so that I can just get this alignment right. Obviously once you've got one in, the other one will go in. Tighten them up. There you go. That's it. And the cab will tilt on those hinges now. That's the end of this episode, YouTubers. Stay tuned for the last episode in this series, when we'll fit the remaining front panel parts and complete the build. And if you like what I've built, you can own it. The model will be for sale. Details at the end of the final video in this series, so watch out for that. Lastly, do you have any thoughts on what I should build next? If you have, please drop me a line. Thanks for building with me today. Don't forget to click on the like button, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel. Bye for now.